This is all about Bitcoin, a show dedicated to all things, questions, and markets related to Bitcoin. Little b for the currency and Bitcoin, big B for the network. A collective journey to understand, apply, and use this innovation. All Bitcoin, all the time. Taking a look at Bitcoin right now, the Coindesk Bitcoin price, XVX index, currently over the $23,000 threshold, now up about 56 basis points in the green. The most reliable reference prices for institutions since 2014 are now published under the Coindesk brand, trusted globally as the leader in crypto news, events, and data. Here's our Coindesk Bitcoin news roundup. Bankrupt lender Genesis and parent Digital Currency Group are reaching an initial agreement with main creditors. Coindesk sources saying the term sheet includes an equitization of the 10-year promissory note worth over $1 billion that DCG gave to Genesis in return for claims from failed hedge fund Three Arrows Capital. DCG is the parent company of Coindesk. This is a developing story. Meanwhile, crypto exchange Binance is temporarily suspending U.S. dollar bank transfers starting this Wednesday. A Binance spokesperson telling Coindesk just 1/100th of the monthly active users use USD bank transfers, and affected customers are being notified directly. Binance.us is not affected by this suspension. And local and foreign crypto exchanges have pledged aid to Turkey after two powerful earthquakes, and multiple aftershocks have so far claimed at least 2,100 lives in Turkey and Syria Monday. The international crypto community has shown an eagerness to send donations via digital assets, with multiple platforms pledging support, including Binance, Gate.io, and Bitfinex. Crypto exchange BitGet has already pledged 1 million Turkish lira, worth around 53,000 US dollars, to humanitarian aid, while Huobi Global has promised 2 million lira. Finally, a bankruptcy court judge declined to rule definitively on whether to appoint an independent examiner into the FTX bankruptcy case. The U.S. government argued that statute called for the judge to demand such an examination, while FTX said a probe would represent a costly duplication of up to $100 million worth of services. During the Monday hearing, FTX CEO John Ray saying the collapsed crypto exchange is being advised by cybersecurity company Signia after a massive hack in November. FTX saw mysterious outflows worth hundreds of millions of dollars in early November, around the time it filed for bankruptcy and founder Sam Bankman-Fried resigned as CEO. Ray saying he hired technical experts in an attempt to shore up FTX's insecure environment, and that Signia had prevented what could have been further hacking. Separately, Ray's hourly fees are not cheap, telling the court he charged FTX $690,000 for his first few weeks on the job. All right, joining us now to discuss today's FTX hearing is former Orange County prosecutor Steve Barrick. He's currently a partner at Barrick & Associates. Steve, great to have you on the show. Did you get a chance to hear the hearing? And if so, what were some of your key takeaways?
I did, and thank you very much for having me. I think what's interesting here, I think the Bitcoin community as a whole has to look at this hearing and this process as something that's very important. I think the community as a whole should want an independent examiner brought in. I think that right now it's very important to maintain credibility within the industry. I saw the hearing. I listened to some of the things Mr. Ray said after I got over the shock of how much he was billing for the first few months. I think it's very important that this process is very clear, very transparent. Those hacks that occurred in and around the filing of the bankruptcy look very suspicious to me and really have to be examined. I know Mr. Ray is trying to keep everything in-house, but I think an outside examiner would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, so the bankruptcy court judge declined to rule definitively on whether to appoint an independent examiner into the FTX case for now. Now, you mentioned John Ray, the current CEO of FTX. He previously cited that an independent examiner could cost $90 million to $100 million based on his experience with working with companies like Enron. Does that sound right about you? Does that sound about right to you?
Well, look, he's billing at over $1,300 an hour, and I think he billed FTX almost $700,000 in his first few weeks on the job. So I give him a lot of credit for coming out and saying, or a lot of nerve for saying, hey, an independent examiner is going to be incredibly expensive. $90 million seems extreme, but I will tell you, this is a very complex case. It's a very complex issue. but I think it has to be handled in the right way to ensure consumer confidence and investor confidence in the Bitcoin community going forward. So yeah, look, I'm not saying it won't be expensive, but that number seems extreme to me. My prediction, by the way, is that I think the bankruptcy judge is going to appoint an independent examiner because I think the stakes are just far too high.
Well, there were more than a dozen states that have called on an independent examiner. And Ray himself said he was not aware of that. He was only aware of maybe 2 states requesting that, which is surprising.
Right.
The U.S. trustee also did not bring up any issues with conflicts with Sullivan and Cromwell, the law firm representing FTX, who also advised them prior to the bankruptcy. Why is that the case that wasn't brought up? Would that not be pertinent to an independent examiner?
Well, I think right now, I think people have to understand this from a legal standpoint. This case is unprecedented. It's a novel, a new marketplace. I think everyone's trying to just get a handle on what the proper course of action would be. I would imagine that at some point the U.S. trustee may bring up the issue regarding conflicts, regarding these law firms and their prior relationships. But I think for now, I think the biggest battle or the most interesting decision is going to be an appointment of the independent examiner, because a lot of whatever the decision is on that issue is going to trigger a whole host of other things.
Well, you mentioned the hacks, and I was looking at some criticism online from folks watching this hearing. They felt that Ray's reasoning fell short. For example, he talked about the cybersecurity environment around digital assets make it dangerous to allow access to an examiner. Yet his team was the one that lost or reported, more than $400 million worth of customer assets through hacks. Is there a conflict there?
Well, there's certainly a lot of nerve. I think that, look, he is trying to, this is quintessential. Whenever a business goes into a bankruptcy court, the existing business tries to limit the power of any independent examiner, any trustee. Any business will battle that, whatever industry, right? So I understand why Mr. Ray is making the arguments that he's making. I don't know if they're very strong. And I think the facts in some way makes those arguments look ludicrous on their face, to kind of almost argue out of both sides regarding the points he made during the hearing. So look, I understand why he's making these arguments. They're uncommon. I think they're going to be very persuasive, to be frank with you.
Well, in the case of Celsius, that bankrupt crypto lender, they did benefit from the report of an independent examiner. Do you think it cost $90 to $100 million? And if not, why is this case? Well, I imagine it's the complexity that this case does. That make this case for FTX, solid in that it will be much more expensive than the Celsius one.
Well, look, I think the issue in the FTX case is, and I'll just make a broad statement based on being a former, there appears to have been a lot of fraud. And I think that's where I just think that the independent examiner is going to be dealing with getting down to the bottom of things factually, dealing with the trustee, dealing with government agencies, including prosecutors throughout the country. So I think it is going to be very complex. I think the issue with FTX is the issue of whether there was any criminal wrongdoing. And I think that's why that makes this case more complicated. $90 to $100 million, I think, is a little bit, I think there's some hyperbole going on there, to be quite candid with you. But it is going to be a very in-depth process for this examiner. But look, at the end of the day, if FTX is going to survive or morph into something else, or for the betterment of the entire industry as a whole. I think it's very important for an independent examiner to come in, issue an independent report, and really get down to the bottom of what happened here. But I think it is going to be more complex than the Celsius case.
Steve, John Ray is an attorney previously known for leading the Enron recovery efforts. Your thoughts on how he's handling the legal proceedings so far?
Well, I think Mr. Ray has got a tough job. He's obviously a very experienced lawyer, a very articulate lawyer and a smart guy. I think he's got a difficult job. I would say his biggest problem is just the public relations problem. I think that anytime you're dealing with facts as outrageous and extreme as this, and salacious almost, he's got a tough job. So legally, from what I've seen initially, he seems to be doing things in a way that most lawyers would do, that most good lawyers in this space would do. His biggest battle, I think, is in the field of public opinion, and also I'm not even sure if he knows all the facts involving this company quite yet. So he may be feeling like he's drinking out of a fire hose at this point as well.
Yep. Well, we do know at the end of all this, there will be winners, and that's the lawyers for sure. Steve, thanks so much for joining us. That was Steve Barrick, partner at Barrick & Associates. Coming up, BTC price analysis, and with Brazilian investment bank, BTG Pactual, joining us after the break.
The chart of the day is brought to you by Crypto.com, the world's fastest growing crypto app.
The emergence of NFTs on Bitcoin has led to increased activity and experimentation on the network, augmenting average block size and leading to higher fees per block, according to Bitcoin research firm Fundstrat. Purists, known as Bitcoin maximalists, warn that non-fungible data inscribed on the Bitcoin blockchain is an affront to Bitcoin's core principles and has the potential to clog the network. Fundstrat confirms NFTs are undoubtedly serving as a source of demand for block space. This This chart shows the mean block size has increased since the Ordinals protocol, which allows for NFTs to be stored on Bitcoin's blockchain, started to gain traction toward the end of January. Separately, another example of greater Bitcoin usage, the Bitcoin Lightning Network, a layer 2 payments network built on top of Bitcoin, has reached an all-time high in terms of capacity or the amount of Bitcoin locked in payment channels, according to the block. Right, joining us now to discuss is Andre Portela. He's the head of digital assets at Brazilian investment bank BTG Pactual. Andre, great to have you on the show. In January, we saw Bitcoin rally. A bit of profit taking on Monday, but seems to be over the $23,000 threshold now. What does your outlook for February look like?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me here, Christine. I think it's important for us to take a look of these last rally, specifically since the beginning of the year. The markers were way higher. Bitcoin is one of the best assets in times of performance. But so far, it's been this crypto rally. It's been a part of a more broader asset appreciation in a risk-on movement this year. Okay, so if you take equities are higher, S&P, Nasdaq, and mainly if you look to the tech ones, they are some even higher than the moves in crypto. So it's important to have that as a overall scenario, especially because we still very correlated in crypto to the overall macro things that happen in the broader economy. Right now, the market seems to have a more, I would say, a clear view of peak rates and peak inflation for the Fed, and that's what's the main driver for this rally. So I think probably most of what we will be seeing the next months, in my opinion, will still be tied to these macro views. Okay, again, looks like we are reaching peak interest rates by the Fed, inflation as well, but there's still some doubts in the horizon regarding, okay, will we have a recession? If we are going to have a recession, how strong it will be? We had a non-farm payrolls last Friday, and it was way out of a recession fears, but the market still look into that. So I think we'll still have to have a close eye on the macro things.
How is it being traded? How is it being used in Brazil?
Brazil is a very interesting country, Christine, because and even if you look in crypto as a whole, it's very interesting to look to Latin America, because if you move from country to country, we can pretty much see very different uses of crypto as a whole in Bitcoin. Okay, if you go, for instance, to countries like Mexico or El Salvador, people use a lot for remittances. If you go to Argentina or Venezuela, where the countries are into hyper inflation scenarios, people use crypto, and specifically Bitcoin, as a way out of their sovereign currencies. And in Brazil, people look way more for investment and speculation. So there's a strong view that, crypto is a new technology, and together with this new technology comes a new asset class, and people basically use in their asset locations to gain capital appreciation over time. And last year, of course, was a tough year for overall crypto, but still we have, and it's interesting because even with the terrible year that we had last year, we didn't see, at least here at BTG, a shrink in demand for clients to understand what's happening, from clients wanting to start engaging crypto, clients wanting to understand what are the best instruments that can engage, if it's through funds, ETFs, or even investing direct in crypto. So, and in Brazil right now, we have, in the end of last year, we have these regulation passing in the Congress. Was the first phase to have a sound regulation in Brazil. Now we're moving to the central bank to give them that detailment of the regulation, but the market's quite solid here.
Well, I just spoke about how Bitcoin is being used for NFTs and the Lightning Network for micropayments. Do you look at usage as a potential catalyst for driving Bitcoin in the future, or is it going to stick to the macroeconomic picture?
I think it's a mix of both, Christine. The problem is that we had a huge macro event last year. Okay, that was the increased interest rate with an unprecedented pace. So when you have an event with that magnitude, it's hard to look to the let's say to the fundamental specifics of each asset. But of course, on the long run, the fundamentals will prevail. So and this macro, as soon as these, let's say, more macro thing with the Fed goes more into, let's say, a normal pace, people will pay more and more attention in the fundamentals. Okay, so right now we have this huge, let's say, first rally that is recoupling from the lows that we've seen. To move beyond that, we'll need to see not only a more clear view on the macro overall scenario, but also in the specific fundamentals with each crypto, with each project. Okay? And I think, well, these things that we're seeing with NFTs in Bitcoin, I think, well, the more, pure Bitcoin guys, they complain, but I think that's the beauty of technology. Okay, the technology is open, is permissionless, so people can use for whatever they want. That's the beauty of it.
All right, Andre. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. That was BTG Pactual Head of Digital Assets, Andre Portillo. That's it for All About Bitcoin. I'm your host, Christine Lee. We'll do it all over again tomorrow at 3 o'clock Eastern. Also join us tomorrow morning for First Mover at 9 a.m. Eastern. You're watching Coindesk TV.